Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where everyone is, and welcome to the webinar series on legal and regulatory frameworks and PPPs. Today, as you know, we will be focusing on Kuwait. My name is Ijaz Ahmed. I am with the PPP group, or the cross-cutting solutions area, dealing with PPPs in the World Bank. We are extremely honored and fortunate to have Mr. Abdul Aziz Al Hadeb, project manager and one of the most senior members of the Kuwait Authority for Partnerships, a good friend and a great host whenever I've been in Kuwait. So, a quick overview of the game plan for today. I will provide a very quick overview of the bank's assistance in developing the legislative framework for PPPs in Kuwait. We will then invite Abdulaziz to give us an update on Kuwait's PPP program with focus on the new legislative environment. And then we'll open the forum to question and answers where I'll try to lead off with a couple of questions. So, a quick background. Our involvement, and I was actually also fortunate enough to be there in the very beginning. Our involvement began in 2005, so it's been a while. When we helped provided technical support in the drafting of a law and regulations and a guidebook, and after submitting this to the government of Kuwait, there was a pause for a few years. And then in 2008, we were told that the PPP law has been enacted and the regulations have already been approved. And we were asked to come up with a new guidebook. So when we looked at the law and the regulations, they were quite different from the drafts that we had prepared earlier. But that was a consensus law that came out of the parliament. It was sort of a hybrid between a land law and a BOT law, some focus on real estate kind of transactions, but it was what it was, and through the guidebook we helped put at least the content issues in a normal PPP project life cycle. On the substance side, we saw a few things which we thought would probably need to be addressed at some point, especially when it came to issues like security over assets, setting up special purpose vehicles, and entering into direct agreements. But I think the consensus at the time was, let's get started, let's get these projects rolling out, and from experience we'll see how, if any changes do need to be made. But with the same law, Kuwait did manage to make progress. They've awarded an IWPP contract, the Az-Zour North Phase 1 project. It's under construction right now. There is a good pipeline of projects, but after the closing of the project, what we saw was we have a new PPP law now, and after many years of being away from the Kuwaiti program, we are re-engaging and trying to work with the partnerships authority in developing a guidebook which would be issued in terms of the new law. So with this background, I would now like to invite Abdul Aziz to tell us about the new law and where the Kuwait PPP program is overall. It would also be useful to listen to him about what the future plans are for the Kuwait PPP program. So over to you, Abdul Aziz.
Thank you very much, Ajaz, for the good introduction. Pretty much you summed the whole presentation in a few lines. But I'd like to welcome everyone to this webinar, and I'd especially like to welcome Ajaz, a very major contributor to this program in Kuwait back in 2006 and back in 2008 when the law was first established or first passed by the parliament, As Ajaz rightfully mentioned, back in 2006, there was a proposal prepared by the World Bank on the request from the Kuwaiti government, and the law was pretty much concise, included all aspects of PPPs, from build, operate, and transfer, and even managing on a PPP basis. Then this proposal had to go through the relevant public channels in the state of Kuwait, namely the Council of Ministers and the Parliament. And after going after the Parliament, we got the actual law passed, which was Law Number 7 of 2008, which had some issues related to that law implementing it. And after the implementation in 2014, we managed to amend this law or substitute it to the new law, Law Number 116 of 2014. So I think it's better to start with the presentation, and probably the picture will be much more clearer from that aspect. So Kuwait Authority for Partnership Projects is the relevant public entity in the state of Kuwait, centralizing all PPP projects. Therefore, instead of the previous processes in the state of Kuwait, we have the Ministry of Public Works or the Ministry of Electricity and Water. Each had their own interpretations of what was a PPP, and were sending mixed messages to the international investment community. This provided ambiguity, uncertainty to certain investors, and to rectify this issue, there was this proposal to establish a centralized entity in the state of Kuwait to centralize all these procedures. CAP serves as the main body responsible for PPPs. CAP aims to utilize the private sector skills and expertise to maximize value for money and service quality. As you guys are very well aware, the state of Kuwait is financially stable. It's a financially rich country. However, we are looking for PPPs to add to our economy in line of new technologies, providing quality jobs, and providing the highest level of efficiency in managing major PPP projects. Our main mandate requires us to develop and venting unsolicited proposals. We are also required to do all the pre-feasibility studies, development, and the TE selection. Usually, we would like to have this action be taken by the line ministries, where they will bring in their transaction advisors or their advisors to develop their feasibility studies, their RFP documents, their RFQ documents, and to take ownership of these documents before presenting it to CAP, where usually our role would be to revise these documents, centralize the criteria, make it a fair game for everyone, and then tender it. So our main role is to be actually the facilitator of PPPs after the public entity or the line ministry has made the decision to enter into a project through the PPP framework. However, in actuality, we are proceeding in selecting the transaction advisors and preparing the feasibility studies and the pre-feasibility studies, taking it up to the committees to get their approvals and going for tendering. I think what makes our projects very unique in the state of Kuwait is the introduction of joint stock companies. So every project we tender has to establish a public joint stock company, and these companies have to include a number of stakeholders, mainly the government through Kuwait Investment Authority or the Social Security funds and other governmental entities, in addition to the private sector, and most importantly, 50% usually goes IPO to Kuwaiti nationals. Our key objectives is to increase Kuwait's GDP of diversity and its sources. As you know, Kuwait is highly dependent on oil, so we'd like to diversify our dependency on oil and increase our GDP with a lot of number of sectors instead of oil and gas, increase private sector participation, improve public sector service quality, promote human development, and create quality jobs for Kuwaiti nationals. So instead of most Kuwaitis going to usually public sector jobs, we'd like to give them the opportunity through PPPs and through the joint stock companies to get access to quality jobs in the private sector, to develop their competencies technically, financially, legally, to increase our GDP production and strengthen our economy. We also look to promote scientific research and technological development, mainly from the international investors who usually come into Kuwait with technologies proven internationally. These technologies have been vetted by lenders, proven operated, constructed internationally, and we think will add value to what has been already developed in the state of Kuwait. So this slide basically shows the story of where we started and where we are right now. In 2008, the original law was passed with its executive regulations. It discussed all the roles of the shareholders, the Council of Ministers, the Higher Committee, the Partnership Technical Bureau, which was CAP, Kuwait Authority for Partnership Project at that time, and the relevant public entities' roles. So to talk about it very clearly, if you look at it as a company, we, CAP, Kuwait Authority for Partnership Projects, report directly to the Higher Committee, which acts as the board of directors, if you will. So with these board of directors, we usually get all the approvals on the RFPs, RFQs, feasibility studies, whether to consider a project for a PPP or not to consider it as a PPP, and to solve all major issues. It also clearly stipulates the private investors' rights and obligations, but to a certain extent. So it wasn't very broad in that sense. After the law was passed, we established PTB at that time, which was the body or the task force in charge of tendering these projects. After that, after implementing a number of projects and having a lot of projects and very ambitious program in our pipeline, Az-Zour North was passed. It was tendered, awarded, and constructed on law number 39 of 2010. Also, at that time, law 2008 was enacted, and it fell under that umbrella as a general law. And then we have a specific law for IPP, which is law number 39 of 2010. So it was successful. The law was successful. However, it could be much better. And we had a lot of experiences in a lot of different sectors. For example, wastewater treatment, mass transit projects in the metro and the rail, and also with a number of other sectors like wastewater and solid waste treatment. So after gaining all of these experiences, we moved to change the law, and we went through all the relevant procedures with the Parliament and the Council of Ministers, and hopefully, thankfully, we managed to pass law number 116 of 2014. This law resembles to a great extent the law that was first proposed by the World Bank in 2006. So it talks very clearly about all the rights and obligations of the private sector, all the rights and obligations of the public sector, all the responsibilities for line ministries, and the way forward to have a more efficient program, getting out the pipelines or getting the project out of the pipelines at a timely manner. And then the CAP was established. CAP will now replace the Partnership Technical Bureau as the relevant public body for PPPs in the state of Kuwait. The difference pretty much is legally. So now as an entity, we are much more autonomous, we are much more independent, we have more freedom to act as the centralized body. So one of our advantages is that CAP has the right to subscribe on behalf of Kuwaiti citizens for the Kuwaiti share in the public joint stock companies, which is 50%. We look to do that because we want to protect the Kuwaiti citizens from the construction risk. So when we tender a project, when we award it, when we establish the project company, CAP subscribes on behalf of the Kuwaiti citizens in that project for the number of years required to construct the project. After the construction and commercial operation of the project, we go and distribute these shares to the Kuwaiti citizens at bar value. This way, we have protected the Kuwaiti citizens from all the construction risk, and they have a sound investment to participate in. Next slide, I want to talk very quickly about our accomplishments, and Ajas, please feel free to interrupt, or if you find any questions in between, we can attack it right now, or if you prefer at the end. As far as accomplishments are concerned, on a PPP multi-sector roadmap, we developed and consolidated PPP roadmap for Kuwait. It is very clear for all stakeholders in the state of Kuwait, the Parliament, the Council of Ministers, the law ministries, even the private sector. We developed a detailed PPP project prioritization framework and a model. This is very important because we are getting overwhelmed with the number of projects that want to be tendered as a PPP. Therefore, we were looking to prioritize all these projects by having, for example, the power projects as our top priority, since power is always in high demand in the state of Kuwait. Uh, when we have power available in the state of Kuwait abundantly, then we can focus on all the other projects to provide power for them and have them getting constructed and get out of the pipeline. It's a note worth mentioning that we have the lowest tariff internationally, I think, in the world for kilowatt hour. It's 2 fils per kilowatt hour, which is very, very low. That's why we have the high consumption of power. Therefore, we always need to have abundant number of power plants coming out of the pipeline very quickly to facilitate for all other projects to go out of the pipeline. We got a PPP certification, completed 6 training modules to certify CAP staff and international PPP experts. And it is very important that we shed some light on this, that we had some resistance from public entities when issuing our PPP law and getting the projects through the PPP framework, as they were used to having all these projects under their umbrella. They had all the power of tendering these projects. Then PPP was established. This authority was transferred to us to facilitate for this tendering. So naturally we got some resistance because a lot of them didn't really understand how a PPP works, the benefits of having a PPP, contrary to their usual process of going through the tendering process of an EPC, engineering procurement contract. So there was some resistance, but we managed to overcome this with providing training for all the line ministries that we interact with on a daily basis. Fatwa knowledge transfer sessions. So Fatwa in Kuwait is the legal advice and legislation entity responsible for all legal issues in the state of Kuwait. We had a long time of training them, getting them familiar with all the agreements that get used to. Usually they used to get a brief 10 to maybe 30 pages contract in Arabic and used to tender all these projects on that basis. Now we are trying to get them on board and educate them, hold their hands, get them across the street and understand that PPPs require a lot of more documents, land lease agreements, direct agreements with the lenders, ECWPAs, offtake agreements, and the shareholders agreements for the companies, articles of associations, memorandum of associations, and so many other issues, where all the responsibilities are clearly identified and clarified for all the stakeholders. This took us a lot of time to get them familiarized with all of these, as this will be playing a major factor in crystallizing and materializing our PPP program. Number 3, we are very proud to say that Az-Zour North Phase 1 was the first true or pure PPP project in the state of Kuwait. Before that, we had some take on PPP or some take on BOT developed by certain line ministries that were not really true in their essence as a PPP. So Az-Zour Phase 1 was the first PPP project in the state of Kuwait. It produced 1500 megawatts of power, and we earned a PFI award from Reuters as Power Deal of the Year in 2013. We managed to procure 5 strong bids from international consortiums with local participation. We got the lowest tariff for the past 60 years in the Middle East for power per kilowatt hour, which we are very proud of. This, if anything, says that the international committee views Kuwait as a very stable environment and competed very aggressively with the lending community to facilitate this project during the financial turbulence, because this project was issued in 2010. We were just recovering from the 2008 financial situation, and this showed good sign for future things to come. Number 4, the new PPP law was developed, which we are now using in 2014. Very influential law, to be frank. It tackled a lot of the issues that were silent about in the previous law. It clearly defined the regulation and the obligation on the public entities and also the private sector. The executive regulations were passed shortly after. This also took, to a certain extent, a lot of the explaining of the law, drafting the regulations, how to take each item forward, and lastly, the transition plan. So we developed the bureau, and then we got the authority, CAP. So the transition from a bureau to authority, this was a task that was completed fairly quickly. And currently we are implementing the transition steps, and we are very fairly advanced. Next, I'd like to shed some light on the very ambitious PPP program that we have in Kuwait. So as you can see, we have a number of sectors: power, wastewater, education, solid waste, real estate, transport, and some new projects coming to light. For example, we have the ports project. So we're going to change some of the ports in the state of Kuwait and tender it as a PPP. In addition, we're looking into tendering airport projects, but as a managing PPP program. And going through the projects very quickly, so we're now working very strong on tendering Az-Zour North Phase 2. The RFP has already been issued for this project. Al-Khairan IWPP will be also coming out very quickly, hopefully within the next 3 months. This will also provide for 2,500 megawatts. Then we have Al Abdaliyah ISCC, so this is a semi-combined power plant, solar semi-combined power plant. Fairly small in size compared to the previous projects, but it will be a pilot project for the solar sector in Kuwait. Then we have Al Hayman wastewater treatment plant. This will be the largest wastewater treatment plant in the Middle East. The RFP is also ready on this project and will be sent out probably within the next month. Same with Abdaliyah. We have the Kuwaiti Schools Development Program. So in Kuwait, we have roughly 900 schools. We're trying this first pilot with 9 to 12 schools. After the success of this project, we envisage to have much more projects being tendered from the Ministry of Education as PP, especially with their facilities. Then we also have KEBD treatment plant. This will take, for example, 50% of the municipal solid waste and treat it. So this is the first phase. The RFP is also ready on this and will be issued very quickly. We have another novelty project, which is Failika Island development. We're looking to really revamp this whole island. It's in a major position. It facilitates for a number of reasons, different sectors. It can work as a tourism site. It can work also for power plants. We can use this site for the access on the coast to also provide desalination for water, and can be used as an anchor project with future anticipation of tourism traffic. So we can use this to facilitate a certain project, make it the anchor, and have tourism and traffic go through this project. Lastly, we have the Commercial and Recreation Center in Kuwait. This is more important to the Kuwaiti nationals as it will be tangible. So it will be a commercial and recreational center where everybody can interact with the center and really feel the implication of PPP, contrary to other projects where it's pretty much in the production of power, the desalination of water, the treatment of wastewater treatment. Most of these, the Kuwaiti nationals will not feel the benefit of PPPs because it is mostly intangible. They just turn on the tap and water comes out, or switch on its power and the power light comes on. Then we have the rest houses on Doha Shalit Center. This is a fairly small project. It's pretty much 17 rest houses on all the highways in the state of Kuwait. We have South Jahra Labor City. So for this, we are looking to consolidate all the labor in the state of Kuwait in one area to facilitate for them all the services required in healthcare, their special needs, and facilitate their transportation in and out to better manage our cities. Also, lastly, the two major projects, of course, we have is the Kuwait Metro project and the Kuwait National Railroad. The National Railroad will be connected to a big GCC plan, and we're looking to connect to this roughly in 2018. The RFP for these projects will be ready in 2016. Same for the Metro. So this is a snapshot on the projects that we have currently. And as I mentioned earlier at the start of this slide, we're also looking on receiving airport projects in addition to ports projects, and these will definitely increase our sectors to more areas. On the next slide, we'd like to talk about a little bit the shortfalls of law number 7, which was the original law, and why we found the reason to change it to the new law. So the original law number 7, presented a number of obstacles to the procurement of a large PPP project, including the award-based and the highest share price rather than the cost of the service, the timing of the IPO, and the inadequate lender guarantees. So, in law number 7, we did not mention a direct agreement with the lenders. We did not mention a shareholders agreement. We did not mention articles of association and the obligation of the lenders in the project in case of default or in case of termination by the state of Kuwait for mismanagement of the project by the investor. So it talked very clearly about step-in rights, for example, and remedies, and how to find mutual interest for both parties to see the project continue rather than terminate. Also, we talked about the IPO, because previously in law number 7, usually by law it says the IPO has to happen before the commercial operation of the project, which provides a lot of risk for any investor, because they will be going and investing in a project before the construction, which is not the idea of what we have in Kuwait, where we are required to incorporate public stock companies to distribute wealth in the state of Kuwait. So this is our way of distributing wealth, establishing public stock companies by the state of Kuwait, and giving out 50% Kuwaiti citizens at par value. So this is one of the ways that we use to distribute wealth. And one of the main issues was the award. So before it was purely on the financial or share price per stock of the company. However, now with the new law 116, we treated that where it will take into consideration the tariff of the service provided. The second issue is the change in public entity direction. So as I said earlier, we have some resistance for public entities. They used to come and approach us with a request to tender a project as a PPP, and then midway during producing the feasibility studies, preparing the RFPs and RFQ documents, we get them requesting us to pull back or reconsider their position on PPP. This used to really deplete our resources and our efforts, and we rather have them focused on other line ministries where there is much more, let me say, seriousness in issuing projects as PPPs. Another issue was the access to accurate data and information from public entities. This is a major issue with all line ministries. They are now moving into the direction of having everything electronic. All data will be electronic. Now everything is pretty much hard copies and very hard to find the accurate, relevant data, not outdated. So most of the data is outdated. Most of it needs to be updated. Most of it needs to be found first to be updated, and that costs us a lot of time. So this was one of the shortfalls in the previous law where it did not tackle the issue. Another problem was land allocation and planning. The previous law pretty much talked a lot about the land allocation, since land is very scarce and not very available, or not very let me say accessible to investors, since most of the land is pretty much taken over by Kuwait Oil Company, where oil is found under it, and would like to keep them clean and ready for future fuel explorations to extract the oil there. So this caused a lot of issue, and the previous law talked a lot about reorganizing the land, allocating the land, and so forth, and really didn't shed light on PPPs. So with the new law, we minimized land allocation issues and had it being dealt with the Ministry of Finance directly, as they are the relevant public entity of land distribution and allocation, and focused with our new law on purely PPP. Lastly, there was a general awareness of PPPs among public entities issue. So public entities express unfamiliarity with PPP's concept, leading to slow adoption, primarily to the novelty of a model in Kuwait. To build awareness, CAP continuously holds training sessions and workshops to ensure public entity employees are equipped with the required PPP knowledge. As I mentioned earlier, we got in-house advisors, and we invited on a monthly basis. Each month we used to focus on one line ministry and get them to understanding how PPP affects them positively, how it can make their job much easier, how it can make their lives much quicker, much more efficient, and this was spread through all the other line ministries. Next slide. I want to show you guys the difference, more detailed, between law number 7 and law number 116, and where there was certain developments. So the award criteria I mentioned earlier, in law number 7, projects with a total cost of 60 million Kuwaiti dinars had the award criteria limited to the share price only, so it was purely financial. With the new law, as you can see with the tick in green, the award criteria can include a mix of financial and non-financial elements. This included items such as the share price, included items such as the tariff. So for Az-Zour Phase 1, we looked at the tariff provided by each investor for kilowatt hour, plus the share price they are proposing to buy in the company, which is requested for their own share, usually not more than 40%. We used to weight it together and come out with a formula with the winning bidder. Second is the shares and warehousing. So, IPO took place before the start of operations, leading to several legal issues and add risks to the public. Especially lenders had a big issue with that. They were worried that IPOs were not going to be fully subscribed, and their concerns and risks were understandable because as lenders, they understand it's very hard for people to come and invest or subscribe for an IPO without seeing the actual project tangible or constructed. With the new law, CAP subscribes to the shares till the project is fully operational. So not only during construction, but after project commercial operation, then we distribute these shares to the Kuwaiti citizens. So we will provide them with a sound investment. Next, the unsubscribed shares. So in the previous law, unsubscribed shares must be re-auctioned, which is impractical and may lead to financing shortfall from the lenders, especially for the project. And in particular, the previous law was very clear that the winning bidder, once the IPO is not successful, they were obliged to take all the unsubscribed shares. This caused an issue for the lenders, so they didn't really know what they were getting ownership of. Was it 40% and 40% plus the unsubscribed share, which could go from all the way from 5 to 50%. So they can literally own 90% of the company, and they have to finance that in their equity and capital, which caused an issue for them. In the new law, we protected this risk. CAP has the flexibility to offer winning investor, public entity, or to re-auction. So whenever there is a portion that is unsubscribed, for example, 10%, firstly it goes to the public entity. If it doesn't wish to subscribe for that, then it goes for the re-auctioning. After that, if nobody wants to take it, then the investor will be required to take it. Then we have the initiator advantage. So previously, the initiator for unsolicited proposal in the previous law had the right for 10% of the project company at a 50% discount, which may lead to financing shortfall. In the new case, the law is clear on the cases where initiator status applies, removing ambiguity and financing concerns. Because in the previous law, it wasn't really very clear where we can apply this 10% and where we can apply the 50% discount. Next, the lender's direct agreement. So we all understand that for PPPs to be successful, we need to have the lenders content and satisfied with the documents. Previously in the law, there was no mention for any right in the lender. Actually, the lenders were not mentioned at all in the law. In the new law, it lists guarantees lenders can get, including those during the first 2 years of operation and during construction and so forth. So they actually mention the lenders. They mention their rights, their obligations, and how they can remedy a situation in case of default or mismanagement by the project company or the investor. Last key difference is the land lease limitation. So previously, no explicit link between the contract duration and the right of use duration for state-owned property. Now there is right of use of state-owned property is equal to the project contract duration. So there was a conflict before. Does the project term include the construction or does not include the construction? Does the investment term include the construction or does not include the construction? Now it's very clear where we say construction is this much, and then the investment period starts from fully commercial operation of the project. So if we say the commercial term for the project is 25 years, this actually starts after the commercial operation date, which is after the construction. So actually the construction might take, for example, 2 years, then this will be a total term of 27 years. Next slide, I want to talk about the PPP implications on CAP projects. So the increased project spectrums. Number one, PPP is no longer limited to BOT or BOOT. projects, but may also include projects without a build component. For example, the airport project that we are envisaged to handle. They are already built. We are envisaged to tender these projects for management purposes by PPP and by international firms. Secondly, projects can now include infrastructure and land preparation, rehabilitation works within the PPP package. Previously, it was excluded. Longer investment periods. The new PPP law increases the project duration up to 50 years, which could also lead to tendering the projects that were previously economically unattractive to investors. However, I don't think this was a major issue before or now, because most of the projects will be obsolete after 25 years, especially since technology is changing and advancing at a very quick, rapid pace. Anything after 25 years usually is obsolete. Usually the fuel source changes, the technology for burning changes. However, this applies for projects that are purely real estate. So if you remember in the slide with the projects, we had a Labor City project, which is purely real estate. This can go up to 60, 70 years. So 50 will be realistic. On projects that are highly leveraged on technology, for example, power plants, waste treatment plants, usually 25 years is the number, the magic number before it being really obsolete. Number 4, we talk about the ensured project continuity through increased control. So in cases of a breach of contract or faults committed by the developer, the new laws allows replacement of developers or direct management of the project by the public entity or a specialized company, as requested by the authority, public entity, or lender by law. So this is all mentioned in the step in right agreement. There's a direct agreement where we look at number of cases and we look extensively to have the best outcome possible without termination. So we give remedies, durations for rectifying the issue. If not, then and only then the line ministry or the public entity will have the right to terminate, because it is, for example, a power plant is in the mutual interest for all parties to have the power plant continue. As a state of Kuwait, we need it to continue because we need the power. As an investor, as a lender, they need the project to continue because they want to get their returns on their investment. So we have a chance for all parties to remedy whatever obligation that has not been satisfied. For number 5, ensured public interest through contract and modification. The new PPP law allows for certain modification to the project contracts, which are not allowed under law number 7, leading to better fulfillment of the project interest or of the public interest. So as we understand, these projects are very dynamic, and during the tendering process, the RFP needs to be changed through addendum, through requests for clarifications, through issues that are raised by the private sector, and so forth. Before, it was very rigid, very strict. No changes can be done after the approval of the higher committee. Now we are allowed with some certain flexibility to change these documents to have a better result at the end of the day. So we can change these projects as long as there is no material deviation, equal opportunity is still sustained, fairness is still sustained, and the responsibility of all parties is still sustained. So all of these coming together are the real advantages of the new law. The new law, on this slide, I want to talk about the implications to investors in more particular. So investor incentives, number 1, the new law empowers the higher committee to grant the successful investor certain incentives, including exemption from income tax as well as other taxes, custom duties, and fees. So earlier, before in the previous law, this was purely allocated for the Foreign Direct Investment Office. It was a different public entity. It had to go through their board of directors, and it takes really a very long time for us to get the approval. Now, by law, our higher committee has the authority to exempt the investors from income taxes and custom duties, and other liabilities are obligated to comply with this approval once granted from the higher committee. Secondly, the contractual flexibility. The new law provides for a possibility to modify the PP contract in accordance with the mechanism agreed upon, the subject to the approval of the higher committee. Previously, this was not allowed. Secondly, the possibility provides flexibility in contractual relationship and allows sustainability over a period of project, thus securing the continuity of the project in common interest of the state and the investor. As I mentioned earlier, we're looking for a win-win situation rather than a compromise from one party to the other. And lastly, number three, added security to lenders, increased bankability. So this was very evident in the first IWPP project we had in Kuwait. We had very strong interest from the lenders because we provided a very sound and very nutrition or very, let me say, healthy environment for lending. The law allows for differentiation between the project assets owned by the public entity and the project assets which will remain owned by the investor, and thus allows for additional security which may be offered by the investor to the lenders. For example, they now can guarantee the cash flows but cannot guarantee the land. The new PPP law is more flexible in terms of allowing investors to grant security to lenders according to certain conditions, thus renders the project more bankable. So this can be even more evident in our direct agreements where we can, for example, have escrow accounts, put in the cash from day one in escrow, and then inject it in the project company pro rata after the investor has injected their share of the company, and have a better solution for lenders. So this is pretty much for how the investors benefit from the new law. And I think this is a brief look at how the new law has changed from the previous law. And please feel free to ask me any questions regarding any of the issues I discussed or anything else, and I'll try my best to answer it for your satisfaction. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Abdulaziz. That was very comprehensive. We have many people online. We had 150 registered from all over the world. So let's pick out some questions and let's get the Q&A started. Uh, there is a question on your transition from being a bureau to an authority, and I let me start with the question I had in the beginning, which was uh, what changes, what the change from bureau to an authority, what does it bring in terms of institutional uh, capacity or your ability to implement PPPs, which is was so compelling that you have to shift from a bureau to an authority structure. In other words, is does authority have a legal meaning in Kuwaiti administrative law and carries more powers? And a related question on this one from um, I'm trying to pronounce the name. It's Vaya Karapanao, which says what difficulties, uh, you know, uh, what transition difficulties were there, and how did you overcome them? So, can we talk about the transition first?
Yes, thank you for the questions. So firstly, I'll go with what you asked, Aijaz, regarding what are the changes. So what are we bringing to the game after we're an authority from being a bureau? So pretty much it's all internal. It's giving us more flexibility as an institution to go out from the relevant uh, internal structure of the government. So as an authority, we are more ambiguous, more autonomous, more independent to have our own internal structures and internal procedures and regulations for example, hiring. So we don't have to go through the regular governmental procedures for hiring resources. We can go through that with our own agenda. We can have our own requirements that will guarantee getting the sufficient or satisfied resources that can meet our criteria, which will best serve as people who can interact and talk the language with our transaction advisors, with our lenders, and so forth. So this is one of the major improvements. Secondly, we have our independent budget. So usually before, as a bureau, we are part of the ministry, and as part of the ministry, our budget has to go through a number of procedures and a number of justifications and a number of questioning committees. However, as an authority, it is much more flexible. We can ask for what we need when we need it, as long as we can justify it. So this is another advantage that we have. Lastly, and I mentioned it very early in the presentation, we also have a lot of benefits with regard to flexibility to take our authority as an authority. So as an authority, we are more incised to, for example, subscribe on behalf of Kuwaiti citizens in the public joint stock companies. Unfortunately, before as a bureau, so we were a department in the ministry, we did not have the authority to invest or the authority to subscribe on behalf of Kuwaiti citizens. This is one of the one of the advantages, main advantages of being an authority that we were striving to get once we transited to an authority. So these are the three main issues I think really makes a difference with our transition.
I think in
As far
any
as the
we always try to get more autonomy and flexibility, especially in hiring, getting the right people on board. And I think there's a great lesson over here for other countries. Moving on to other questions, there is a there are two questions which are kind of related. One is from Shahina Nisar, which is how do you define project priority with respect to PVPs? I guess the question is how do you prioritize PVPs on what basis? And a related question from Ataullah Khan is who builds the portfolio of PPP projects, line ministries or CAP? So how do the projects get into your pipeline?
Okay, I think these are really important questions. So firstly, well, how do we prioritize? What goes first, what goes second? For example, we have a lot of projects in a lot of different sectors. As I mentioned earlier, I think it is very clear for all stakeholders in the state of Kuwait, for any other project to see the light, we actually need, literally and figuratively, we actually need power. So we need power plants. Therefore, they are the most important projects that we have in our priority. This can also be defined from the strategic plan that we have in the state of Kuwait, developed by the Council of Ministers. So they look at the big picture in the state of Kuwait, and they have their own strategies that we try to facilitate for them through PPPs. So this is one aspect of looking at how we prioritize projects. Another aspect, for example, we look at the number of healthcare or the number of beds available in the state of Kuwait. So we did the study, and it was evident there was shortfall of beds, hospital beds in the state of Kuwait. Therefore, we took the initiative to look for PPP projects to tender to facilitate this shortage. Therefore, we had the right and by the authority to go and approach the Ministry of Health and discuss with them the process of tendering this project. We saw this as a higher priority and we had it up there. Another way to look at it, or how Mr. Khan, I think there was a question from Mr. Khan or Mrs. Khan, on how the portfolio is structured, on what is a PPP. So we don't have the capacity, and we're not required to have the capacity to look at all of Kuwait and say what needs to be done as a PPP and what does not need to be done as a PPP. Otherwise, we need to be a ministry of ministers. So the work around this is every ministry will have their own independent strategy for their sector. For example, MEW, Ministry of Electricity and Water, will have their own vision on their growth of power, the demand of power in Kuwait, the supply, and their forecast. They approach us on what project they want to tender. In Kuwait, there is a law for IPP where it says any project in excess of 500 megawatts of power needs to be tendered through PPP. So in their plans, if they have a power project required to be available in 2020, they come and approach us and say we need a power plant with a capacity of more than 500 megawatts, for example, 200 megawatts to be available in 2020. We take it from there and work with them very closely to tender this project. Another way is, for example, the Ministry of Municipality. They could have a request for solid waste treatment and come and say that there is a project we need to tender as a PPP to facilitate for 30% solid for the new cities that we are developing. Then we go ahead and facilitate with them the tendering process. Once we are overwhelmed, which we are at this stage right now with projects, then we sit with our higher committee and prioritize internally which project is more important. The higher committee, worth mentioning, is chaired by the Minister of Finance, also includes the Minister of Trade and Commerce, the Minister of Municipality, the Minister of Public Works, the Minister of Electricity and Water, the Undersecretary of Electricity and Water, the CAP General Manager, Kuwait Environmental Public Authority General Manager, Kuwait Investment Authority representative, and a representative from the Kuwait Investment or Kuwait Institute for Scientific Research. So on board of this committee, it's pretty much a cabinet of ministers or council of ministers. They have been selected on purpose since all of these projects to a certain level have to go through all of these ministries for approvals and permits and licensing. So as if they are all present in our committee, they will all have the same motivation to get projects see the light. If these projects see the light, the committee gets the credit. So all of them have been gathered around on this committee to facilitate, to expedite the process of getting all the relevant approvals for expediting these projects. And that's why the committee was constructed in this way.
Great, thank you. Now there is a question by Marlo Rankin, which says, it's related to your comment about, uh, bringing ownership in the line ministries. Uh, and Marlo works with the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, and there's a lot of demand in the client countries to undertake PPPs in agriculture irrigation areas. But there is obviously a capacity issue, uh, and so how do you deal with that? And there's a related question by Swital Sindaut, which is also asking, your role in upskilling the skills, the capacities of the line ministries.
Okay, so please correct me, Ajas. I understand that the first question is about how we get line ministries to get ownership of these projects and not
So
back
it's
up
related
at a
to
later
that. So
critical stage.
yes. So how do you
Correct?
get ownership? But ownership is one part, but also
Mm.
how do we capacitate them to exercise that ownership?
Okay. So there are three aspects to this issue. We need to provide them with the tools relevant to get them to have ownership and responsibilities, and then the law comes in to get them obligated to find solutions. So, for example, the first issue, tools. We have contacted a number of training agencies internationally, have them come to Kuwait, run extensive, very detailed, month-long training courses for all the line ministries that we are working with very closely, take them through all aspects of a PPP. So we don't accept here in Kuwait that someone says, I'm a legal guy, I only look at legal stuff. I'm a technical guy, I only look at technical stuff. We have PPP specialists. As a specialist, you must understand the legal, the technical, the financial aspects of a project. As far as the particulars of each project, we go back to the line ministries, and they would provide us with the technical income or the technical information that they have to provide for us to construct an RFP. Then we go back, for example, the fatwa to get more detail on the legal aspects, and the same with the Ministry of Finance for the financial stuff. Therefore, we have a PP specialist who can manage and coordinate all these issues and understand them and talk the language. Secondly, we talk about ownership. As far as ownership is concerned, the law is very clear. I don't have the article in my mind, but I can share it with you at a later stage. Every line ministry must provide or must nominate an undersecretary or higher, an assistant undersecretary or higher level to take part as a committee that we establish. So, for example, the project that we have with the municipality, the solid waste treatment, we have a committee with 5 members. It is headed by the municipality since it is their project. And if this committee does not see success, they are responsible for it. That's why they are chairing this committee. However, we established this committee. We have people from CAP in this committee, people from KEPA for the environmental approvals, and some relevant public entities. But it is mostly chaired by the municipality to take ownership of this project and for them to find solutions internally when we need the data that is required to construct the documents. Lastly, the law clearly defines that there must be an MOU understanding between CAP and any line ministry that approaches us that once we start working on that project, there is no backing away unless a decision has been taken by the higher committee for whatever reason. But you can't come as a line ministry, say, we want this as a PPP, we hire a TA, we do a lot of work, and then back up. I hope this makes it clear. So it's tools, we train them, then we get them ownership through a committee, and lastly, the law protects us with an MOU.
Great. Thanks. I have a question from Fahad Al Mazouk, who says very informative presentation. Given the great incentives from Kuwaiti government to attract international investors, what has been the experience regarding training local talents and national companies to be able to bid and operate future projects in Kuwait?
Okay, this is this is a tough one. To be frank with you, uh, this question is above my pay scale. But usually we are more focused about the public entities. The private sector, we are sure, have the facility and the competency to meet all that is required about getting them up to track or up to speed with all the required information or tools and content skills for them to match the skills internationally available and match our skills. So we're actually looking for the private sector to provide this professionality, experience, efficiency to the public sector. So I don't think it should, it's not the other way around where we provide this experience to the private sector so they can provide it back to us. We're actually looking for the private sector to come in with this experience to us. This is how we look at it because we are inviting international investors. International investors usually for every project when they come to Kuwait look for local a partner. A local partner I think is very critical for international investors. This is the way they see it. This is a new investment, a new country for them. It will be very smart of them to have a local partner with them. During this process of partnership, a consortium, there is a lot of transfer of information and knowledge transfer.
So I think as just closing remarks from your side, there is a question which was from Audrey Mawalla, which said, why do we need a PPP law? Meaning, in other countries there are other countries which have done without it, and some of them are successful. So in your closing remarks, I mean, so the you know what did the law bring to the table for you to make PPP successful in Kuwait?
Okay, so why do we have a PPP law? Why don't we just do it without a PPP law?
Right.
To be frank, mostly investors appreciate having a law because it will very clearly define the obligations of the private sector and the public sector and have a very clear standard for all parties involved and stakeholders. So if people change in this entity, if there is a change of philosophy, the laws is still there, the philosophy is still there, the standard is still there. This is what we are trying to protect. This is what we're trying to bring to the market in the state of Kuwait to centralize all these procedures to avoid what was previously adopted in the state of Kuwait. So we used to have MEW, Ministry of Electricity and Water, have their own PPP. Then we used to have MPW, they have their own interpretation of a PPP and how it's like. It was sending missed messages to the private sector. This way we are protecting everybody's right and obligation and making it very clear for everyone on how a PPP should be undertaken in the state of Kuwait. Most investors like it, to be frank. They appreciate it. Unlike our other jurisdictions in our region, Kuwait is maybe more unique with this side.
That's a great answer. That's exactly what I tell everyone. So, well, thank you
You
very
have
much.
dropped it, Jas. You better say that.
We have actually slightly overrun on time, so thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
No
I mean,
problem.
in our comments, someone said that we should have another one, down the road in a couple of years to see how you've progressed on your projects. So we look forward to that. In closing, I just want to remind everyone that if you please take out a couple of seconds to fill out our survey, which is, I think, on the feedback icon, and it always helps us in making these webinars better for you in the future. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us.